everyone, welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. If you're new here, welcome. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content as Malevolent is in its 5th season updating live. This show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a live update, so if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 229 or part 46, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are recorded live, so you can always listen later. I'm Queen, my pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control Arthur's left elbow.
And I am Peppers. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am controlling his. You know what? I'm controlling his right eyelid because apparently my eyelid has decided to be a little jerk and constantly get swollen every single time I wake up in the morning.
Ew.
Not sure what's up with that. Don't really want to ask a doctor about it. So I'm just going to hope that Arthur is in better health, sad to say, than me.
That's terrible. Who, what? No, absolutely not. Okay. So I have a lot of exciting things going on tonight when it comes to Autopsy, Peppers. For one thing, we have new art. We have like official cover art that says Malevolent Autopsy. And I don't know if you know the person who did this. She's like a really good artist. She's really well known in the Malevolent fandom and like everybody loves her. And she seems really, really nice. But I've never met her before, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, seems.
Yeah.
I don't know. She sounds like she's a stuck-up prick to me.
Peppers did this wonderful, lovely, amazing art. If you are not listening live, it's our cover art of me and Peppers performing an autopsy on Arthur while John wants to strangle Peppers.
Yeah. I couldn't find a way to get him to try to strangle us both, so I had to pick one. I had to pick.
Of course, right, yeah. Oh, yeah, I can't imagine how you would go for that unless we were on the same side. And then it wouldn't be
Yeah.
symmetrical.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would cry.
All right, so Peppers, do you want to give us our recap?
Yeah. Okay. So, in episode 229, ultimately Arthur wins against the urge to drink. He is aware that he has been led into a graveyard, and after some review, they realize that they have been led into the heart of the forest. They're kind of puzzled as to why they've been led there. After some time, they do notice a fairy ring, which, for those of you who don't know, is a ring of mushrooms in the ground. Arthur bends down to smell them and he becomes noticeably giddy. He recalls how he found a fairy ring many years ago in the Boyd's Brigade with William, who was his first friend. William would describe how he would find these fairy rings and dance around them. And when John asked Arthur to elaborate, Arthur starts dancing to illustrate. While he is dancing, Arthur explains how he felt about William and William's father's relationship and how he envied them deeply. When William returned to the Boys' Brigade with a wooden train from his father, Arthur became jealous and the next day threw the train into the fire. You will notice that his speech becomes noticeably strained as he devolves into fits of crying, seemingly unable to stop himself from dancing, as he explains that this final act destroyed their friendship, turning it to ash just like his parents' own fate. And I did add this quote because I really loved it. Like my parents, dead, dead, dead and gone. He devolves into weeping and collapses. The audio becomes noticeably warped, and then the episode ends.
Very spooky episode.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. Something that was really funny to me personally, I was actually bonding with Liz about this. For those of you who don't know, I struggle a lot with secondhand embarrassment, and this tickled that a little bit. Even though it is absolutely meant to be horrifying, I was like, oh no, this grown man is dancing around a fairy ring. How embarrassing. Which is a me issue. But Liz and I did kind of a bond over the fact that it was like, ooh, A normal guy doesn't do that. And yet I think it does really well to show that it has, that the magical kind of enchantment on Arthur is so strong that it's now controlling his faculties, or at least like his mind enough that he's like willing to be both mischievous. It is kind of showing the Fae in their mischief and also their cruelty. So I really enjoyed this chapter.
Yeah, I particularly thought it was interesting. It was an interesting choice to have Arthur dance, and I think it's, for me, I think the most like notable thing was the fact that, well, among the most notable things was the fact that when Harlan is trying to portray a physical movement like that, it's really hard to do. Like in an
Mm-hmm.
audio drama where you have no visuals to help guide you, it's really difficult to convey like, okay, and now he's dancing, and we don't know what that means. Like we don't know what kind of dancing Arthur was doing, and so I think there's a lot of meme potential in that.
Yeah.
Somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody said that Arthur was doing the breaking from the Olympics, that lady who did the breaking dancing, which I thought
Yeah.
was hysterical.
Oh my gosh.
I was imagining like a really weird interpretive dance, kind of interpretive slash folk dancing, I suppose. But he does say it was kind of like the dancing that he did with his friend as a child. And I also, the first thing I said about this chapter, I went into the chapter channel and I was like, hey, this just keeps getting better. Like I can't overstress how I try really hard not to make my positive commentary on the show sound performative or exaggerated, because I know when you say this is the best, it can kind of lose its meaning over time if you say it over and over and over again about the same thing, because how can it possibly be the best every time? So I try really hard to be deliberate about the praise that I give Malevolent, but like Harlan's acting, not his soundscaping, not the voice aspect of his acting, just straight up his ability to act in this chapter, his like, it went so far beyond for me. I mean, the amount of emotion that he was capable of evoking when that wasn't happening to him. That he's not Arthur. He's not, that's not really a thing that was happening to him. He wasn't dancing around a fire. It's so easy to forget that it's not real for me, and maybe that's just because I get really easily immersed, but I loved Harlan's performance, and this whole part has been just, for me, it has just been like a reel of Harlan's best acting work. And I think so often we talk about the script and the sound and the analysis of the character, and I forget to mention how phenomenal it is to hear him put so many complex emotions into just sound alone, and for me to be able to feel something based on that and to forget that it's not real is just like, I don't know, I'm just so impressed, and I am forever amazed that you can do it better next time. I mean, like, not to say that Harlan was bad in the beginning, just to say that he's improved significantly over time and you can really hear the difference. And this part, this whole season, but especially this part for me, has been just a constant stream of wow, he's just getting better and better and better, and it's so cool to be part of that experience and the evolution.
Yeah, I will say, especially for those of you who are not aware, Harlan has been having some vocal cord issues lately, and so the fact that he is kind of dealing with an illness and yet he manages to continue with these performances is really like, whoa. It's like, damn, dude. Very evocative, very convincing. That's something that has always been a struggle for certain podcasts. I won't name, which podcast, but sometimes podcasts, you can tell when somebody's reading off a script versus this is a character that I can fully immerse myself into, who has their own emotions and who is not an actor who is practicing playing a scene. Like these feel fully like completely different characters.
Yeah.
Very I guess realistic and very easy to just fall into the immersion, as I guess the video game critics would always say. Regarding, because this is a podcast that is not only meant to kind of break down each chapter, but it's also meant to break down the themes. And Queen's thing, I think, your strength is definitely in not only polls, but also looking at kind of the overall story and keeping me from like going too deep into actually I think he should it should get worse for him. Actually, I think Arthur should experience even worse things. And then when they happen, I'm like, no, why did that happen? But for this specifically, I did enjoy how he treated William. That felt very normal, especially for, I would like to imagine that his parents' death was relatively recent, when he was a kid in the Boys Brigade, however many years. I'm not saying it was like within the year, but several years maybe prior, and him dealing with that, he's starting to act out from what I imagine the Boys Brigade. I did not bother to research it, but what I'd like to imagine is it's probably very much like Boy Scouts, which goes from, all the way from elementary school. For those of you who are in America, it goes from elementary school all the way to, I think, like the end of high school. And so throughout that time, you really expect a kid who is slowly growing up to really act out. So it's not surprising to me that that is how he acted out, and that Arthur hasn't necessarily allowed himself to heal from his parents' death. It's more just something that he's had to live with and move past. Therapy was definitely not a thing back then. But it to me, I really enjoyed it. Obviously, we have seen moments where Arthur has grown into having friends. For example, James, shout out my guy James, who punched the absolute heck out of Arthur when he was drinking during
Peppers
his.
always loves a good violence.
I love James. James is my guy.
Anyone who will
We
punch
love
Arthur is Pepper's favorite.
And he deserves it. And I say this 100% as an Arthur stan. Brother deserves getting punched. But to me, it's very important that, because I think I actually saw this on Tumblr, and it was a really good insight that I had never thought of we only see Arthur through his own eyes and John's eyes. We do not, I think definitely the majority of us being American, we hear British guy, we're like, oh, I'm sure he's very friendly and very sweet. And we also saw him in this situation where he's very scared and kind of completely out of his depth. And so we don't realize that the personality that we have heard from other people over and over and over again is that he pushes people away. He's very terse. He doesn't talk that much. Yeah, he has kind of that English politeness, but he very obviously doesn't get along with anybody. And to see that kind of start to flower as a child was very fascinating to me, because I keep forgetting the fact that you have to be a Parker in order to befriend Arthur, because Arthur is kind of a dickhead because he has allowed his trauma to shape him. And it's only through his interactions with Parker, with John, with Noel, and with Oscar that we see him fight to grow and get past his trauma and become a better person. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to briefly shout out some of the comments that I've seen. Graham says the way he established this tone of like wrongness from the start, this inherent manicness, even when nothing is outright sinister to begin with, it's masterful. Yeah, I felt like when he was just starting on Arthur's dialogue in the chapter, it was immediately apparent something was wrong, but that creepy feeling of I don't know what's wrong. Vol Control says, I just wait to hear a snippet of my friend Arthur every week. I don't know who this Heartland guy is, which yeah. He also mentioned, Vol Control I've mentioned before, my bestie, and he introduced me to Malevolent, and so we live blog to each other all the time, and whenever a new chapter comes out, we try to do that too. when we were just starting Malevolent after a couple of seasons, he was saying, it became something I came to expect while live blogging to Queen in the last 10 to 15 minutes of a part, like the full hour long part, everything would be turned on its head. And we did pick up on that, like the last 10 minutes of the part for whatever reason, because we didn't know about the votes for a while, was just crazy. And we would have no idea what was going to happen, and everything was going to be ramped up to 100. And now, of course, it makes sense because the last 10 minutes is always just Harlan. We don't really get a say in it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course, it's going to be crazy. I also want to read what Seer of Time said. Random ramble. It was honestly eye opening for me to have it confirmed in the text that Arthur's father was an alcoholic. I know Harlan semi confirmed it out of the text, but still. Not only because it makes even more sense why Arthur would become an alcoholic after Farrell, but it sort of opened my eyes on how even Arthur's parents contained multitudes. All we knew about them was they both committed suicide, yeah, right, and that he loved them to some degree because he wrote that poem in part 20. So when all we have gotten up until this point was all the heartbreak in that poem, hearing him be angry over his father now, it really took me aback and made my heart ache. I am definitely also the kind of person who, if you don't tell me something, sometimes it kind of takes me a while to get there on my own. And while I had suspicions that there was drinking in Arthur's family history based on his relationship to alcohol and the way he spoke about things, I was not sure how Arthur felt about that because, alcohol affects everybody differently, and alcoholism is a serious problem. And it's interesting because some in these situations you hear about kids with their relationship to their family and talking about how that person becomes angry, or that person becomes really tired and just does nothing all day and can't take care of them, or there's so many different responses to alcohol that we didn't really get a picture of what Arthur's father was like until this chapter. And for me, it painted a really different picture from what I had imagined in my head. All that to say, his poem was full of this deep sadness and longing and missing them and needing them and them not being there for him. And it was easy to forget that that's not the only way that he can feel about that. And I loved being able to explore some of that, albeit in a terrifying manner.
Yeah. The chat made a couple good points, so I'm going to slowly move up and then make some final closing statements. First of all, I love because the poem itself I didn't pay too much attention to. The one that I do remember is the one line where he talks about his hatred and how he is struggling to kind of hold it together. And so I do remember he mentions after his parents died how his hatred kind of I don't know how he tried to stifle it and not let himself be consumed by it. And so immediately I can already see because it's a very normal emotion. I am so grateful that I have not experienced anyone close to me take their own life, but I do have friends who have experienced that. And part of that grieving process is this intense anger about it. And that felt very real and very honest to me. Also, someone noted in the poem how he talks about how he feels both a love with his parents, but because they are so distant, I think not only with their depression, but their alcoholism.
I
Mr.
love
I.
the lighthearted tone you have put on alcoholism. Thank you,
Their
Peppers.
alcoholism. Hey, man, it's there. Like, what do you want me to? Oh, their like little teary eyed. Their alcoholism. No, no. I'm gonna add some slapstick. Sorry to the alcoholism. Misra says between the love of both of you to ail my sleeping strife, I've never felt so safe and yet so cold in all my life, which is something that I hadn't noticed when I had listened to it, but it makes a lot of sense. And then someone else noted, AK Trash Pants has said something awesome about we're now seeing kind of Arthur's, I would say pre-canon. We have learned through kind of, because the way that Malevolent is played out, we kind of see everything through Arthur's eye, and Arthur is an unreliable narrator. we're very quickly learning. What we are learning very quickly, however, is that he was not the friendliest of people. And Seer of Time makes a good point. I'm sorry, not Seer of Time. AK Trash Pants says that's so real. Living in constant trauma response forges you into someone that always has their hackles up, always prepared to have a fight for their sanity. So I think that does put it into perspective as to why Arthur acts the way that he does, and kind of this, us seeing how he responds with William is kind of the very beginning of him acting out in frustration, or more than just frustration, in rage, in pain over the passing of his family. And very last thing I want to say, we mentioned the alcohol part. So I've known this for a while, that he is alcoholic. And the reason why I know that his father was an alcoholic was because one of my first couple interactions with Harlan on Twitter was him just dropping randomly in my replies that his father is an alcoholic. I was like, awesome, great. Where did this come from? I think it started
Harlan.
because, yeah, I mentioned how I noticed that Arthur now has a very negative reaction to alcohol. Like, for example, I think it's episode 15 when they're in that sandstorm in the boat, and there's alcohol, and he reacts kind of with disgust after tasting it. He doesn't talk about alcohol that much, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if the taste kind of disgusts him now, or makes him feel ashamed. And then Arthur just dropped in, and he's like, you should have seen his parents. And I'm like, where the oh my God. I don't know you, dude. Where'd you come from? So I thought that was very funny. I wanted to kind of end it on that funny little story.
I love that.
This is a Wendy's.
Sure. Okay, so it's time to talk about the poll, but we have a couple of interesting concepts to explore because the polls continue to be scrambled, and there have been quite a lot of people who have been working very hard to decode and figure this out, and we actually did it. And by we, I mean not me at all, but the wonderful, amazing people in the polls. And I wanted to bring on a couple of them today, some major players in the game, if you will, who successfully cracked the code. Welcome, you guys. Great to have you on. We are so appreciative. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Okay, I'm Kara. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Curry. Yes, that is my legal name. My pronouns are they, them. I am not actually a skeleton in real life.
But you have one, right?
Maybe.
Right? Creepy. Kara, Curry, can you guys tell us what has been going on and how things have been developing and how you guys figured it all out?
Yeah, I'll take the lead here. I'm gonna go all the way back to chapter 226, which was the first one of this part. I believe that's the right number. And at the end of the episode, we're pretty clear we've identified this new entity they've encountered as being will-o'-the-wisps, some sort of fairy lights, and they wonder whether these lights might be helpful and whether they should follow. And because this entity is so grounded in real folklore, everyone listening identified that this was a really, really, really bad decision to follow the will-o'-the-wisp of fairy lights. That's a unanimous no, don't do that. And so we thought it was going to be a really easy decision, not going to merit too much discussion. And then BJ comes on to describe the situation in the poll, as he usually does. And then it very quickly devolves into very eerie, distorted, unintelligible nonsense. We were all left quaking. And then the vote is posted just moments later, and it is also absolute nonsense gibberish instead of the usual poll options we were expecting. So that was insane. People were going insane in the chat And I think I was the first one to offer that maybe it was a cipher. And Joe quickly reacted to my message with a little XP emoji, which we took as an indication that we were on the right track. Jones figured out the votes were encoded in Rot 13, which is like a Caesar cipher, shifted 13 letters, which is half the alphabet. And Joe also confirmed that. So that was the first major milestone we reached, and that was the last milestone we reached for a good long while after that.
Truly, this couldn't have been solved in a more comedic way. Happy, little frustrated, mostly happy. But I actually became a Voices tier patron after the second week poll dropped, because I was losing my mind, but very alone, and I couldn't see what was going on, and I had ideas, I had thoughts, and, well, it snowballed from there. I tried everything. I was doing too much, and thankfully I have a lot of downtime at work, so nothing was too waylaid by my dedication to this, but yeah.
And you weren't alone in trying everything, because I went and counted, not manually, but in the first 29 hours, being like the 7 p.m. to midnight, and then the next 24 hours, we sent over 3,200 messages in poll chat trying to figure this out. Some of the things people tried, not even getting into the more far-fetched things that, like, especially Curry indulged in later when all of these first things didn't work, where people were wondering if the decoded numbers maybe corresponded to coordinates or Bible verses or old Malevolent chapters, and maybe if something was an option 1 that corresponded to the option 1 vote for that chapter, or I'm just going on this list that we compiled, the elemental, like, periodic table, timestamps of old episodes, numerology, and then what ended up being a major component of this cipher was thinking it might be a book cipher, or a variation upon that. And that's when there's 3 numbers. The first number corresponds to a page, the second number to a line on that page, and the third to a word in the line. And luckily Malevolent has referenced so many different texts and poems and songs over its long backlog. And so we were trying a lot of those, but nothing was working out. From the Robert Frost poems to, I tried the Last Unicorn screenplay, because Harlan mentioned that being like kind of the vibes for season 5. Someone tried a Matchbox 20 song because it matched the title of the like piano song Harlan released while this was going on. And Curry got really deep into Faust, right?
Too deep. I read it in German.
And you translated Dies Irae from Latin?
With Google Translate. Like, I was just trying, like, maybe if we count the Latin words and then translate it, and that'll mean something. I was clawing at the walls, chewing through the plaster, yeah.
Yeah, and you weren't alone. We were so desperate that by day 2, Graham says, what if someone wrote the numbers on paper and then ate it and waited for prophetic visions or dreams? And then they did it anyway. That was day 2. I think Joe responded to that saying, I told Harlan, and he just said, oh no.
Yeah, it's truly my one regret in life that I missed that. I wasn't here for that.
Also, again, this is literally day 2 after we hadn't managed to solve it. The first, 3,000 messages we'd sent. Pan asked Joe, who was in the chat, like, we're so desperate. Can you please give us an answer, give us a clue or something? And Joe just responded with a silly gif of MC Hammer dancing. Because we were so desperate for clues, people clung onto that as possibly being a clue so hard that Joe tried to take it back like 5 times every time it got brought up, and we wouldn't let it go because we had nothing else to go off.
I do have to say that there were some people who were far more attached to that being a thing than others, and I will call out Fish because I know there is a good chance he will listen back to this. Fish was like determined to prove that the hammer time joke was a thing when we all knew it was not a thing, and poor Joe was like, no, wait, hold on.
Yeah, I also kind of got pulled into that a little bit. Me reading the MC Hammer Wikipedia page, desperately hoping for something, anything. I mean, you have to try everything, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Bird just sent in chat the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like, conspiracy theory meme but it's just Fish's icon and the words hammer.
Yeah, yeah. It didn't help that then there was the poker connection for a little bit, which I was fully also on board with, but also so out of my depth with that I just kind of like, I'm just going to try other stuff while people think about that for a while.
Yeah, the poker was, Generic Waffle pointed out that BJ in the unscrambled part said you weren't dealt a fair hand, and like dealt a fair hand is kind of a, a cards metaphor. So we're desperately looking for anything to do with cards and tarot, and that was when I think Generic Waffle also on the Wikipedia page for like poker discovered that a hammer is a specific name for a specific hand of cards in poker that included like a 2 and a 7, which happened to be numbers that had come up in the polls so far. So that was a whole tangent. But ultimately, one of the reasons we were so off track was there was a main flaw in our assumptions, or rather that we assumed that the key to the cipher had to be publicly accessible because this was a puzzle for the patrons, so it was probably something like kind of freely accessible on the internet. And so early on, we decided that it probably wasn't a book cipher that referred to a physical page because any book with pages has been formatted so the words fit on a page, so every edition is slightly separate. And that's what makes book ciphers so tricky to solve, is just that you have to have the exact copy of a text. And there were a couple like publicly accessible versions of, say, The King in Yellow, which is the obvious first book to check, and none of those panned out. So early on, we decided it wasn't The King in Yellow, even when a couple days after the very first poll, Scotty said, "Hey, I've got a copy of King in Yellow that Harlan sent me like a year ago." We were like, "Oh, that would be so funny if this was a really long con in the making, like if Harlan devised this over a year ago. Why don't you check for a hidden message?" I think she's shown a black light on it, and there was no black light message. There was no, hand pencil message. And so we forgot about it for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I wasn't there for that. That's my excuse, definitely.
I was there for that, and I have no excuse. There were also the repeated numbers were a red herring, and this was because the first poll was the deciphered ones translated to 7839 and 1779. So the repeated nines seem to reflect old poll wordings, where it's usually a simple phrase, and it's fight the person, try to talk down the person. Try the left door, try the right door. So 9 very well could have been a repeated word for the repeated situation. And then again, the second week, it was 174, 1413, and 98, 1413. So again, that seemed, we were so convinced, I think it was Ren's idea originally, that I very quickly bought on to, that 1413 was a phrase like the bag or the lights. So we should be looking for any text which might contain, where that noun is actually acting as a verb, like light the, or bag the, or, voice the, or something.
Yes, I did Control F search for every instance of bag in the Malevolent Patreon transcripts. I also did that for Yorick, follow, resist, and hammer, unfortunately.
I also want to shout out Stephanie C. compiled all the chapter transcripts, which made searching them really easy. I also, dug up my very minimal Python skills to try to clean up the transcripts to make them easier to search. I cut out all the dialogue tags and stage directions and punctuation so that you don't have to search bag dot the or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously it went nowhere, like everything I tried until the very end.
And one of the things that was so frustrating but also enticing about this is that it was so obvious when something wasn't working. Because if you think of the relative frequency, and by frequency I mean absolute rarity, of the English language compared to the words we were looking for, there were very few words that would be appropriate for this poll. And compared to the English language, essentially since nothing we were using worked, we were all just pulling essentially random words out of the text we were looking at. And so they were always, the, to, it, especially when we were looking for 3 words, nothing formed a complete phrase. And so anytime someone got something that seemed like it might be closer, we were all very excited because it was further than anyone else had gotten. Like your frequency analysis. Although I want you to explain that whole process because it was very complicated but very interesting.
Okay. So a lot of the cipher solvers online that you can find don't accept numbers. They have to, you have to use letters for it to accept it. So what I did was I took each number and I assigned it a random letter, trying to just brute force these numbers into every code solver I can. So, okay, so 78 was A, a 30 was B, and so on and so forth. So once all the numbers were assigned a letter, I tried to do frequency analysis, which is, certain letters show up more often in the alphabet than others, like E and S, etc. I got another random alphabet out of that, and then I put that through what is called a monoalphabetic substitution cipher, which is basically you're just replacing one letter with another letter. It sounds fancy, it's not. And got the weird text, and it was like, well, it's incomplete, technically, so it kind of makes sense that it doesn't make sense right now. Is this anything? And no, it wasn't. It was actually just random chance. But at least it got things moving for a little bit.
Curry and I were talking about this last night. We called that the false positive day because everyone, like, the chat had died down in the weeks that we weren't able to solve it still. And the vibe was very much like once every day or two someone would post the like, "Are you winning, son?" kind of meme. We go, "No, but we're still trying really hard." And so, everyone was kind of leaving it up to the quote unquote like smart or more likely determined people, but then being there to celebrate any potential wins. So it was very sweet, very supportive. And then for people actually continuing to work, well, from the beginning, and then later on, the feeling never died that you have an idea of what if this is it? What if it's this poem? What if it's this thing? And yeah, those ideas were getting more and more far-fetched, but it was so tempting to try it anyway because of the potential reward being so high. It's the what if this is the one? What if this is the key? What if it's this cipher? What if this is the one that does it? I've been getting gibberish for every one I've tried so far, but what if I do it this time and the right word is staring back at me?
The more you get it wrong, the higher the reward is going to be. Like, it's just going to feel so much better. So it's like that constant motivation to keep trying, and every time it doesn't go well, it's like, well, that just means I need to try something else.
Right. And the stakes felt like they got higher every week for John and Arthur because the polls kept being these very high stakes, like there is a right and a wrong, a dangerous and a safe answer. And right now we're blindly voting 50-50 chance. Like, we accidentally pick something horrible for our Borbos. So yeah, there was a lot of pressure to try to solve it, and especially to try to solve it before we ran out of chances because there's only 4 polls per part.
And totally did it in time just for the most recent poll to be sleep versus sleep. It's just chef's kiss. Just, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Like, I don't know if you guys are prepared to talk about this, but there is a flip campaign going on right now.
I think I want to end with that, if that's okay. Because I think it's a very silly and very typical thing for us to end on. To spoil things a little bit, like Curry mentioned, in the end, when we solved things, both options were sleep. And the fact that we're still fighting over which sleep to vote for, I think is hilarious. Do you want to jump to the last, I think it was Saturday, when Harlan finally posted on Instagram a quote for us?
And then we got it like in a half hour. Yeah, so I remember I woke up that Saturday morning and I had a little notification on my phone. Malevolent Instagram posted. I looked at it, and then I leapt out of bed and ran to my laptop. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. And thankfully, I was able to find, with other people's help, the exact edition on Amazon, and Amazon had a preview option that was very buggy, but I luckily got one poll option, which was follow. And then we finally realized that it was the book that we had the whole time.
Yeah, well, yes, so this was a specific edition of The King in Yellow, which wasn't one of the publicly accessible PDFs. It was just a random, published in 2021, kind of only for Amazon edition. I checked every library within driving distance of me, and not a single library had a copy of this book because it was published so recently, and it's such an old book that any library that had it had a much older version or had an ebook, which wouldn't work for the page editions for the book cipher. And Amazon was being buggy all day. So Curry got this tantalizing, like, first confirmation early in the morning, and then we made no progress for the rest of the day until at night. I was just really like, a couple of people, to give them credit, did order the book, so we were going to get answers soon enough anyway, but it was going to take a couple days to ship. And so I just sadly kept pressing the look inside button to try to get another page, and it did finally work for me, and I got to see 2 more pages that corresponded with 2 more votes, and I think it was drink and pass from the cursed stream part. And so that was really exciting. That was like the third data point, felt like a confirmation that we'd finally done it. And so at that point, we had enough information to solve future polls, but we were still wanted to see what the past polls had said. And so Curry and I were both trying to recreate the page formatting exactly to try to recreate the pages that were still hidden by Amazon. And we got some more words from there. But the next day, I think it was Ren who was back scrolled through everything and realized this is the same exact copy that Scotty had received and who had told us about 2.5 weeks ago. And we just didn't ask her to check the page numbers.
It was beautiful. I'm a huge fan of ARGs. I've never been actively part of the solving of one before, but it was just, I truly do not have words for the way it went down. I mentioned this when we were talking last night, that the whole thing very much had the vibe of a bunch of D&D players trying to solve a, puzzle for toddlers that the DM gave them. And just failing miserably, because, I DM myself, and I've been there, unfortunately.
Yeah, so knowing that Scotty now had the book, the next part came out Tuesday morning, really early, I assume because of the time zones Harlan's traveling. And so the poll was posted immediately. I was very excited that we knew exactly what to do. We were gonna, again, it was another very dangerous situation, this being the chapter that you all just described earlier. And we're excited that finally we have the upper hand, finally we can help save our boys. And then Scotty posts them, and the first one is sleep. And we'd already hinted someone was speeding up part of the chapter, and you realize that Harlan was saying the word sleep really stretched out. If you speed it up, you can actually hear the word. So that was spooky, but sleep wasn't a surprise. And then the second word was also sleep, which is so funny. And I can't imagine what it was like for Scotty, seeing the first one asleep and going, okay, the second one's going to be the safe option, like it's always been. It's been drink or pass. It's been follow or remain. It's been, moons or purse, and then going down, 29 lines over 2 words, and then it also being sleep, and realizing the point when we'd finally gain the upper hand, when we finally thought we had an advantage, the rug was swept away from us, and we realized choice is only illusion.
Yep.
And now we're fighting over which sleep to vote for, and it's currently at 50-50.
Yeah, we are sitting at a
Is it
tie
really?
right now. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So I have to say, this is the part where I came back because I had realized we'd solved it, and I was very excited. And I just straight up said, oh, that's hilarious, because that means we solved it, and he only gave us a hint when it was too late to matter, because both options are sleep.
I didn't think of that.
And I thought it was hysterical. I thought it was funny. And then of course, Fish comes in going, guys, I think the context of the sentence that the word that sleep is in makes a difference in which sleep it is. And I was like, no, there's no way. That the context of the sentences hasn't really mattered for any of the other words, and I just don't, I think it just doesn't matter. I think it was a big troll move. The feeling of powerlessness that you are getting right now because it's too late to matter, that's the whole point, right? But Fish was really adamant that it mattered, and several people started seeing that picture of it, because there were a couple of specific sentences that these words were in that did kind of sound like they were somewhat related if you squinted. I mean, I think that it makes sense. I'm willing to believe, but I am still kind of skeptical. At the same time, it doesn't hurt to vote for the one Fish says is safer, because they're both sleep. So I was like, sure, yeah, I'll vote for number 1. That's fine. But now, because we've been voting for the second option for so long, everybody just keeps defaulting to the second option. So now we have to work really hard to get the word out that we did solve the puzzle, and we do have a reason to think that maybe number 1 is safer too. And that's been way more difficult than you would think.
I think what was funny about this is we tried to interpret the word sleep in the context to begin with. And it was, sleep it off versus sleep on a cold moor. And we're like, sleep it off sounds much more cozy than like sleep on a cold moor. So we originally encouraged people to vote for option 2, but then we zoomed out and looked at the full like scenario of the sleep, and that when the sentence was like something about don't sleep versus sleep it off. And I don't know, I think it's funny how we're so lost. We're still scrambling for what if it's this amount of context, what if it's that amount of
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. I kind of agree that I don't think there's a difference, but also, just in case I'm wrong, if anything these past few weeks have taught me is that I can be wrong a lot. I still flipped. Vote 1. Do the flip.
I've always said I will vote to prevent a tie, no matter what the option is. But if we can, it would be great if we could flip it to 1. The thing is, this flip campaign started so damn late. Like, we didn't decide to do this until really late in the game. And now we're all nervously teeth chattering away about whether or not it's going to matter, because extra scary, Harlan's not even around to confirm when the poll's going to close. Usually if we're close to tying, or if we're tying, I'll pop into a chat and say, hey, can you just confirm when this one's going to end? Sometimes he'll even say, yeah, when do you want it to end? And we get to pick, but that's not the case right now. He's in another country. Well, he's always in another country for me, but he's in the country that Malevolent isn't made in. Yeah, so that's where we're at. Do you guys have anything to close on?
I just wanted to make one note that I want to just shout out to Harlan for how much fun we had during all of this. I can tell there was so much care put into it. I think part of it was the devious red herring of the repeated numbers that threw us off for so long and made us convinced that, number corresponded to words. And I can tell how intentional that was because it kind of bent the rules for one of them. Technically, the word moons should have been 137.15.2, but instead it was 14.13 when line 14 only had 11 words on it. So you had to spill over onto the next line to get to moon. So that really should have been line 15 instead of 14. And also moons is an odd choice for lights, but that made me think he was just looking so desperately for repeating numbers so he could throw us off like that he was willing to do slightly different, carry over to the next line, which is not technically how the book cipher works, and use moons instead of a more obvious word like lights, just to keep us guessing like that. And this whole experience was so lovely to get to collaborate with everyone and learn a whole bunch about ciphers and cheer people on who were learning so much on Wikipedia about so many.
I read so many Telegraph code books. I can't. Oh my god. But regardless, I just had a blast. I love puzzles, and it was so fun. But I think besides all the extra learning I got to do by accident through this, it's so cool now, looking back with hindsight and everything, just to see another game master, just kind of the inner workings and puzzle design and stuff, because I'm usually the one who is designing all the puzzles for my friends and whatnot when we play, and it was so cool to see it that way.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I will briefly mention, because it would be sacrilege if I didn't, the Oracle has been invoked for this vote. And that means that Danny's mom, Danny is a longtime Malevolent fan who is a friend of Harlan's and did the artwork for Benevolent, the Christmas special, and does lots of silly doodles for every chapter that get posted to social media, but to the Discord first. And Danny's mom has never been wrong about a vote. Danny will tell her mom about Malevolent's chapter and the most recent vote, and her mother, who is, I believe, a writer, one of the professions that she has is, I believe, is an author, will say what she thinks is the right vote. And Harlan agrees that she has an uncanny ability to be correct, and she's never been wrong before. So when Danny's mom, or the Oracle, says that we should vote a certain way, we usually all follow it. And yeah, so Danny's mom did agree that the first option of sleep was the better bet after hearing about all of the context and the reason why. So that is a very important thing to mention, because the Oracle does not get invoked for everything. Very sparing use of that. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really deeply appreciate it. I love having guests on, and thank you for taking the time to catalog all of this for us and be great archivers of our history, and good job with the puzzle cracking. Okay, so, Peppers, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I loved hearing all of that, and especially I was completely blind to literally all of it. The moment I saw the ciphers, I was like, nope, I'm not looking at that. I'm not touching that. Somebody else can do that because it's not me. I don't have the patience. I will cry from sheer frustration, so it's not happening. So honestly, you guys to have been able to crack it is like fantastic. I would have been never succeeded. So I think that's so cool. And I love how now it's just sleep versus sleep. And guys, we could do something really funny. Let's tie.
Oh my God,
Let's
Peppers,
tie the
don't even
vote.
joke. Don't even
It would
joke.
be it would be so funny
It would
if
be
we tied.
mean. Peppers,
Please.
he's on
It would be
vacation. He didn't
so
record for a
funny.
tie. I guarantee you, this man did not record a tie on the last vote. That would be so mean to do to him. What is he gonna do? What?
It
He
would
can't
just
record
it
something
would
while he's on
just
the road.
I don't know. It would just be hilarious.
All right. Well, really quickly before we go, I do have a big announcement to make, a very exciting thing that is going on. As always, thank you for joining us. Today is, what is today? September 6th. And we are officially live everywhere. So the first episode of Malevolent Autopsy, recorded forever ago for part 44, is up right now. You can find it on Spotify. You should be able to find it on Apple Podcasts, although I haven't seen the listing yet, so fingers crossed that it comes up eventually. We are also on Libsyn. We have our own website and all of that. We will be sure to post the links and everything, but you can definitely just search us up, and we sure do come up when you type in Malevolent, which is crazy. And thank you so much to Peppers for the amazing cover art. It's truly very sweet of you, very pretty, and I didn't pay a dime, so this is all very much free art from Peppers, which is very nice, and I appreciate it deeply. And thank you so much for being such a lovely co-host, and everybody who's been guests, and our emergency hosts, and everybody who comes and listens. It's been such a wild ride, and I am so excited to do even more.
Yeah, and I just have to say this podcast wouldn't be possible. Like you guys don't understand how much time Queen invests in this
Oh,
podcast to keep it running and to prep it. You don't understand the DMs we exchange of how often, like how hard she works on this. I feel like I'm doing fuck all, quite frankly.
you
I'm just there to chill. And so it's super cool to the people who have been in this podcast as guests or as emergency hosts when I just don't want to fucking be here. Absolutely huge thank you to you guys. Sometimes they are short notices just because just due to the nature of perhaps a spooky stream, Harlan,
it's
or
mostly a spooky stream.
yeah,
Yeah.
I will blame Harlan on
Yeah,
this.
it's fully the impromptu spooky streams.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have to scramble to change the schedule. I don't know, this community's super cool. I love how tight knit everybody is. And you guys like really make this experience super fun. You guys are super cool and I appreciate you guys and you guys are so funny.
Yeah, and thank you for so much too. We have a transcription team, Worm, Graham, Lambda, Bird. You guys are incredible. They write up transcripts every week for this show. They're on top of it. They are so phenomenal. They are like, they're out there listening to our voices over and over again for way longer than an hour that we record. So like, thank you so much. We deeply appreciate you. I also want to give a big shout out to Yami, who is the person who came up with the idea of a podcast quite a while ago, and before I was even part of the server, and was really instrumental in being a good motivator to get this going and actually like record something, do something. Lambda, who was also just an incredible support throughout the whole process and constantly jumps up to say like, let me help you troubleshoot. Lambda will also be doing some fun recordings in the future that I'm going to be publishing that we will debut live, even though they won't be recorded live, because he gives some very crucial information about the votes and things like that and the culture of the Discord. So looking forward to airing those. And definitely giant thank you to Ren, who is like a podcast mentor, host mentor, gives me critique and feedback all the time that is very actionable and very good. And without Ren, this show probably would have taken much, much longer to get better the way that it is. So thank you to everybody who makes all of this happen. And I appreciate all of you so much, but Peppers, this would not be half as fun without you. So thank you, and I love you so much.
Oh, well, I love you too. And very last thing before we end this stream, of course, thank you so much to Harlan and Joe. This would not be possible without them.
Yeah, definitely huge props to Harlan and Joe. Without Harlan's encouragement of me to actually get started on something like this and do it and really say like, yeah, go for it. Like, this isn't going to happen again. Just do it. It wouldn't have happened. I have to say, if you give me so much credit for this podcast, I need to give even more credit to Vol Control, my best friend in the world. He got me into Malevolent. Without him, I wouldn't be here. Thank you, V. Anyway, this has gotten extremely long. We could probably keep thanking people forever. So, Peppers.
Yeah, enjoy editing this.
The horrors persist.
And so do we.
Good night, everybody.